Hello, my name is Tomas Björkman. I'm the founder of the LUCSUS Foundation in Stockholm. It's a foundation that is looking into the relationship between personal inner growth and development and societal change. And I want to show you some slides. So I would start by sharing my screen. There we are. So first, just a few words about myself. I'm Swedish. I studied mathematics and physics at Uppsala University, but I spent most of my active life in the business world as a serial entrepreneur, starting businesses in property, IT, and banking. I sold my banking business some 15 years ago and had the opportunity to start my own foundation, the LUCSUS Foundation in Stockholm. And we have our own island outside Stockholm where we have a facility where we are doing youth camps in the summer. And during the rest of the year, we do adult developmental retreats and invitational conferences. I have also written 3 books, The Market Myth, The Nordic Secret, together with my friend and colleague Lena Andersson, and The World We Create. And they are all about our human world and how we can understand our human world in these interesting times of societal transition that we are facing right now. I would like to start by really zooming out on the situation today, looking at our planet and our civilization really from a distance to try to understand what is going on and what we can do and what our role can be in this situation that we have right now. And to do this, I think that we should first acknowledge that we are actually living in very good times in many, many ways. I could even say that we are living in the utopia of our grandparents. So in this photo, we can see some boys from just a little bit more than 100 years ago. And one of those guys there could easily have been my grandfather. And the world that they would consider being an absolutely dream is in many ways the world that we are living in today. We have modern healthcare, we have democracies, we have human rights, and not just in the Western world, but I would even say that 90% of the world population today are living lives that would seem utopic to my own grandparents. But at the same time, all those forces that have created this fantastic world, they have at the same time had a backside. And we are experiencing not only an environmental catastrophe and world poverty and terrorism and obesity crisis and psychological ill health crisis, markets that are crashing and political turmoil and all of these things. And now lately the pandemic and even the storming of the Capitol. And it's easy to be completely overwhelmed by all these crises that we are facing in the world today. But I think that one way of looking at all these crises and what is going on in the world is to understand that they are actually not separate crises, that they are symptoms of an underlying meta crisis of our time. So in this talk or lecture, if there is one thing or one of the things I would want you to take away from my talk is the concept of the meta crisis, that we can better understand our present predicament if we do not just look at these crises as individual phenomena, but understand that there are underlying causes for all of these, and these crises are more rightly seen as that they are more rightly seen as these different crises are more rightly seen as symptoms of an underlying crisis. And that underlying crisis can be expressed in many ways. It can be expressed in the fact that our present worldview might have run its course and delivered its potential and has run out of steam. Another way of seeing this is to say that the increase in complexity in our outer world has to be matched by an increase in complexity in our inner world, and start to realize that there is sort of an important relationship between what is happening in the outer world and what is happening in our inner worlds, and our ability to take in and handle what's going on in the outer world. And this, I would say, is also a key insight from this presentation. Another way to look at this meta crisis is to say that we have all of a sudden facing a lot of wicked problems. And a wicked problem is a problem that we cannot really solve using just our normal tools of dividing a problem into the small parts and solving the parts one by one. They are very much interlinked and difficult to define, and socially complex and interconnected problems. So these types of problems need a completely different approach. So I sometimes jokingly say that we can best understand this meta crisis with 3 simple graphs. So here are those 3 simple graphs, and we will look at them one by one. The first graph, this one, is really about the exponential technological development and the exponential forces that we see today. And this exponential technological development has resulted in what some people today call a VUCA world, a volatile, uncertain world full of complexity and ambiguity. And it's really difficult for us humans to grasp exponentiality. So I will just stay on that concept of exponentiality for a moment. So if we make the following comparison, and we look at us taking a number of steps. If I take 30 steps forward in a linear manner, I come to the end of a larger lecturing room. But if I take 30 steps exponentially, meaning that I double the length of each step I take every time I take a new step, where do you think I would end up then? Think for a moment and see if you can imagine 30 steps doubling each time you take a step. Well, actually, after 30 steps, you end up at the moon. And that is, of course, something that is not easily intuitively grasped. But what's even more strange and difficult for us to grasp intuitively is the fact that where do you think we would be after 10 steps exponentially? Well, after 10 steps exponentially, we are still in the block. So something happens there in between. And if we have an exponential growth, it's easy to think that the exponential growth happens here, somewhere in the middle. But it is actually, of course, exactly the same growth that has been going on all the time. Nothing happens with the growth. It's just a doubling for each step. But the effects of that doubling is very difficult for us to grasp. So when we are living through times of exponential growth, first, we do not notice it. And that is what is so dangerous with many of these exponential functions relating to environmental change. And that is that they have been going on for a long, long time. And we are still in the block. And we are not getting super worried. But with the same growth, things will start to happen at a very large scale, very, very fast. So I would say I'm trying to understand and get a feeling for exponential growth and exponential functions is very, very important in our effort to try to understand what is going on in the world today. The second graph is the graph describing a paradigm shift or a shift in culture. And here I'm using the Berkana model from the Berkana Institute in the US to try to model what is happening during a paradigm shift. And the last time we had a major paradigm shift in the Western civilization was during the Enlightenment, when we went from a pre-modern religious worldview, which perhaps had its peak in the late Middle Ages, and then technological development happened. We had the invention of the printing press. A lot of other things also happened, but the printing press could be a symbol for the technological development. And the printing press and other technological development resulted in the need for something new to emerge. The old paradigm could not any longer hold the technological possibilities and the possibility space that had opened up from the new technology. So we went into a very turbulent period with the Enlightenment and the French Revolution and the Napoleonic Wars, and Europe was in a turmoil for at least 50 years. But then something new emerged. And what emerged, the new paradigm, is, of course, what we today call modernity, a scientific, rationalistic paradigm. But it's important to remember that when we have these paradigm shifts, there is nothing deterministic in the process saying that we will have a positive outcome in a paradigm shift. And here is where we have the third graph. The third graph is really pointing to the fact that these evolutionary processes, they come to a fork or a bifurcation point, as they are called in complexity science. And complexity science explains how a complex evolving system, like a cultural system, can develop linearly and incremental up to a certain point. But when you reach that point, which is usually called a bifurcation point, then you have some sort of phase shift. And the system will either face a breakthrough in complexity, a step up in complexity, or a breakdown of complexity. And I think that we are at one of these crucial bifurcation points again, right now. And of course, now the old paradigm is modernity. And we could say that modernity had its peak up here in Scandinavia, perhaps in the 60s or 70s or something. And then technological development created a pressure. And again, many different technological inventions, but I would single out the internet, just like I single out the printing press. And these new technological possibilities again open up new possible spaces for evolution, but also leading us into a period of turbulence. And that is what we are seeing right now around us in the world. And again, there is nothing inevitable about how this will play out, but certainly something will emerge from this, something will come out. And we will be talking a little bit about what this could look like. As I said, what is coming out from this process, and it's important to remember that this is an emergent process, meaning that we per definition cannot know what will come out on the other side. We cannot manage this process or control the process. But I think that we can guide the process and we can facilitate the process and we can increase the possibilities for a breakthrough rather than a breakdown. Some thinkers looking at the situation today say that we are reaching this bifurcation point quite rapidly, and that the breakdown scenario could either be a complete breakdown into chaos, a fragmentation of the global civilization, a breakdown of supply chains, breakdown of nation states. It will be small warrior states against each others, and we will probably not be able to manufacture advanced technology any longer, because our supply chain and our knowledge about how to, for example, manufacture a mobile phone today is dependent on international and even global cooperation. So one scenario would be a breakdown into complete chaos. Another possible scenario, trying to avoid a breakdown into chaos, would be oppression, that we would have either oppressive governments trying to take control and stop the descent into chaos, or we would have a sort of a technological dystopia where we would go back into some sort of technological feudalism where the tech giants would control us and try to avoid a chaos. So you could say that we could have a political oppression or a technological market oppression or something like that. And in complexity theory, when you look at a bifurcation point like this and possible outcomes from that bifurcation point, some thinkers there are talking about attractors, that these different states there are natural attractors where the system can go. And here we have two attractors, the attractors of a complete breakdown and the attractor of oppression. And then the question comes, could there be a third attractor? And what would a third attractor look like if we would have a breakthrough rather than a breakdown in complexity? And I think that this is a key question. And even if this is an emergent process, and therefore it's very difficult to paint any clear pictures around what such a third attractor, what such a positive outcome of a transformation could look like. But I think it's important for us to acknowledge the possibility of such an outcome. And just knowing that there can be such an outcome could give us hope. It's at least giving me hope. So if it's difficult to talk about what the result of the transition will be, the transition itself is also very difficult to talk about, because the transition will be very, very messy, and it will be very, very emergent. So just trying to grasp and model the period of time that we are in right now is very difficult. Two thinkers who have been doing a lot of thinking in this area is James Arbib and Tony Seba. And in their publication, Rethinking Humanity, they have really gone into these thinking in detail. So I really recommend that report, which is available online for downloading. And they are really going through and analyzing what are the driving factors that are driving a breakthrough, and what are the factors right now driving a collapse. And I think one thing that is very clear from the report is that this middle possibility of just continuing with incremental change, trying to adapt this system even more just incrementally, that is not possible. So moving into the future is very much like trying to build bridges into a thick fog. We cannot really see what is ahead of us, but still we need to move forward, and we need to try, and we need to try to build some sort of bridge into the future. And again, as we have really no idea what this future will look like, especially since the technological development is now so fast that we have really no idea where technology will be in just 5 years, let alone 10 or 20 years. So I personally think that technology will play an important role in this transition, but it could both be a negative role, that is, as we can already see today with social media, that is fueling the fragmentation and the breakdown. But it can also be a positive role where we are using distributed network technology, blockchain technology, and similar, and artificial intelligence and similar things to help us with both global governance and perhaps also reinventing distribution strategies and upgrading the market. So my best advice at this point is really that we need to experiment, and we need to experiment fast, and we need to be prepared to fail, but we should try to build many different bridges into the fog and see where we can find some firm ground on the other side. So in trying to understand this transition time and the near future, I think we should look at some new important academic disciplines that in some respects are not that new, but they have been, I shouldn't say forgotten, but there hasn't been very much interest in these academic disciplines during the last 50 years or even 70 years or something like that, because these disciplines become even more important in times of transition. So I want us to look a little bit deeper on deep history as an academic discipline, deep sociology, and also deep psychology. And I will start a bit with the deep history. And in doing that, I will adopt a systems theory perspective. And I'm sorry, this slide is in Swedish, I just noticed. So systems theory are looking at complex systems. And that is what we have in the middle here of this graph. So first here we have the simple systems, which could be a planetary system. And these systems are very simple to understand and very simple to model with traditional physics or chemistry or other ways. And then we have complicated systems. That could be like a complicated watch or a Boeing 747. It's a very complicated system. It might even be that complicated that no single human being can understand what's going on anywhere, but everywhere. But it is in principle possible to make a map and to understand such a complicated system. A complex system, on the other hand, is a system that is between a complicated system and a chaotic system. And a chaotic system, for example, a gas system or something like that, is completely stochastic and can only be modeled with probability theory. Whereas these complex systems in the middle, like biological life or like a civilizational system evolving or the market system, they have a property that is called self-organization. They are self-organizing systems. They are living systems. And that makes them very creative, and it makes them very interesting from the perspective that when they are self-organizing, they can have these sort of emergent transitions where they are moving from organizing on a less complex level to a more complex level. And one could say that the whole evolution of the universe, going back 13.8 billion years, has been an evolution that can be modeled as complex systems, with repeated differentiations and integrations and self-organizing processes leading to emergence that give birth to more and more complex systems. And if we look at the biological evolution, for example, and we look at the period of biological evolution, and then we zoom out from that, and we can see that even if we're usually associating evolutionary theory with the evolution of life, it has actually been the same type of evolutionary process from a systems perspective that has been going on ever since the Big Bang. First, as a physical evolution of elementary particles, of atoms, and of molecules. And that then turned into, through an emergent process, turned into the biological evolution of life, and also importantly, more lately, with the advent of humans, turned into a cultural evolution. But these different levels of evolution can really be understood from a complexity science perspective as one ongoing evolutionary and complexifying process with quite different dynamics. So the physical evolution has got a very, very slow dynamic. The biological evolution is much faster than the physical evolution, but still slow compared to the cultural evolution, which is moving with a speed many, many, many times faster than the biological evolution. And all the way through this process, we have an increase in complexity of the whole system. So again, going back to the same report as I mentioned before, one can, in the cultural evolution, see a number of distinct steps through the history of humanity, where we have had the evolution from hunter-gatherer societies, what is here called the age of survival, into the age of extraction, which started at the axial shift some perhaps 3,000 or 5,000 years ago, when we started with agrarian societies and agrarian city societies. And then later we had agrarian states, agrarian nation, agrarian empires, and then the industrial order of the West. And now we have come again to one of these bifurcation points where we can have a breakthrough and or a collapse. But this bifurcation point is different from all the previous ones. And what makes this different are a few things. This is the first time that we see a global shift in civilization. Even when the Roman Empire collapsed, the whole world system did not collapse. It was a part of Europe only. Other systems, other civilizations could survive and would rise into a dominant position some years after the Roman Empire fell. If we have a civilizational collapse today, it will most likely be a global collapse. It's also faster than ever. Technology is driving this really, really fast, and we today have technological development during a lifetime that in previous times might have taken many hundred years to achieve the same sort of shift in magnitude. We are for the first time up against the limits of our planet, the planetary boundaries. Again, the shift is systemic, emergent, and transformative. The fog is thicker than ever before, and humanity is, for the first time, potentially self-aware of the shift. We are starting to wake up to the fact that we are in this shift, and parts of humanity are starting to become self-aware of this shift. And perhaps we need to all become self-aware of this shift to really be able to contribute to this shift in the best way possible. I think we take a short break here before we go into the deep sociology and deep psychological aspects of the times that we are living in. So see you in the next segment.